Good morning, and in case I don't see you later, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to Flat Earth UK Live. Joining me tonight is a man who needs little introduction. Mark Sargent, welcome to Flat Earth UK Live.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is all mine, Mark, most certainly. On tonight's show, we will discuss the very real possibility that we live inside a Truman Show style enclosed structure, and that the powers that should not be and NASA have lied to us about the very nature of the ground beneath our feet. We're told we live on a spinning globe. Mark Sargent, can you tell us how you found out we are in fact stationary and flat?
It started in the middle of summer of 2014. I had been looking at a whole bunch of different conspiracies and was kind of bored with the regular stuff. I mean, I know I take all conspiracies seriously, but there was one that kept going in front of me that I completely ignored, and everybody does. Everybody that's in conspiracies, we all know about the flat Earth. We've all heard of it, and we've all dismissed it because it's ridiculous. It's insane. It's utter. It cannot be possibly true. And I got a hold of a couple of YouTube videos, one from a guy in Germany who was talking about the flight paths in the Southern Hemisphere. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. And then, of course, I got a hold of the Matt Boylan video where he, the iconic one where he's sitting down on the couch, his girlfriend's interviewing him, and he's talking about how he worked for NASA when he was 25 years old, and that they told him during a kind of a little party on the East Coast that the GPS system didn't work in Antarctica because it was flat. And I thought, wow, that's a great story. I love that story. I'm going to disprove this story because there's no way it could be real. I mean, again, he tells it pretty well, and for a sci-fi or a movie of the week or something like that, I think it's pretty cool. But there's no way it could be real. And so I sat down for the next 9 months and went over just about everything I could, and every road I went down when it came to trying to snuff out the flat Earth, I kept running into dead ends, which meant I kind of changed it up along these lines, is that there should have been overwhelming amounts of scientific evidence, huge piles and stacks of things, tons of videos, tons of pictures. It should have been tens of thousands of pictures, thousands of hours of videos, and all these things that should have been there. I could just open up one box, dump it out, and say, well, that's the end of flat Earth. And every time I dumped out a box, there was nothing there but packing popcorn, and not even much of that. And so after a while, I started getting more and more frustrated because I was going through all the boxes, and finally when I got to the end, I turned around and it was just a bunch of cardboard. And I started realizing, wait a minute, how do I know it's a globe?
My next question, why do we think we're on a globe?
Exactly. Which was the question I put when I built the Flat Earth Clues back in February of 2015. I put the question out there. It's like, how do you know you're on a globe? Because how I know seems to be the same reason that everybody else knows, which is kind of weird because with a lot of things that we know in life, we all find out different ways. But when it comes to what the Earth is, where you are now, we all kind of answer it in two different ways. And the first is always the same, which is, well, duh, we know. It's obvious. It's like fire,
the globe.
Fire burns, water is wet. That's something that has to do with gravity, or at least a name that we call it gravity. It pulls it to the ground. But with the Earth, it's not like that. We all equate it to those things. The Earth is round, we assume it. It's like, well, duh, it's round. But it's like, well, how do you know that? Well, because we saw the globe when we were growing up as children. It's like, yeah, okay. How else do you know? And then you said, well, eventually everybody comes back to the same thing. It's like, well, I saw the picture in the textbook. I saw the picture here. I saw the picture. I saw the poster on the wall. And it's like, okay, if the picture is on the wall, where did it come from? It's like, well, NASA showed us. And I say, well, so you believe them? You believe them wholeheartedly? And they go, yeah, we believe them. NASA wouldn't lie to us. They're they wear white uniforms. They don't carry guns. They smile on camera. They seem to be a fairly benign organization, similar to Starfleet. I go, okay, that's great and all, but they've only shown you one picture. And I'm not kidding you when I say this. And I know some people say, oh, you're beating a dead horse. No, this is very, very important. And that is literally from 1972 to summer of 2015, last year, there was exactly one full picture of the Earth in sunlight. And we've all seen it. It's the bottom part of Africa and all of Antarctica, and it's mostly cloudy. I was
bit later on maybe talk a little bit about composites. But I was hoping maybe to talk about a little bit about composites, maybe a bit later on. But before that, I was hoping to get a bit of your insight on Operation Fishbowl.
Ah, yes, Operation Fishbowl. That was a little side note when I was doing the research, and that was when because every road I went down led into places that I didn't think I'd be going. Like, for example, the azimuthal equidistant map, or Admiral Byrd's missions down to Antarctica, even though he's known for the Hollow Earth, even though he spent most of his life looking for something down in Antarctica and then dying 1 year later after discovering it. Don't think it's a coincidence there. But how things change, the big sweeping changes that happens in our world starting in 1956. One was high altitude nuclear testing, starting from 1958 until 1962, and it combined the United States and the then Soviet Union, the USSR, where they were both, not only were they ramping up their rocket production very, very quickly, but they were attaching atomic weapons to them, and they were firing straight up from altitudes anywhere from supposedly 50 kilometers to 400 kilometers and detonating some really big shots up there. You got to remember that Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those were only 20 kiloton weapons. And these guys were firing up megaton weapons. That's 1,000 kilotons, megaton weapons up in the sky. And they were doing it on a regular. These are the only two countries that could even do it in the world. And they were both just hammering the sky. And it didn't. And one of the packages, at least on the American side, the Russians don't name it as creatively as we do, but one of the packages of high altitude atomic weapon testing for the Americans was called Operation Fishbowl, which was a series of shots that I think was done in 1959, 1960. I'd have to look it up just to make sure. But it was fascinating because why would you name high altitude nuclear testing that package? Why would you name it Operation Fishbowl? It didn't make any sense. It was hiding in plain sight. And that was, I fully believe, not only were they trying to test the integrity of the firmament or the dome or whatever you want to call it, but they were also trying to map out the sky. And that was after the first few shots. You can look this up if you get a chance. The first few shots were upwards of over 3 megatons, which is massive, especially for 1958.
Did this come directly after Operation High Jump?
No. Operation High Jump, and they're easily confused. The Operation High Jump was an interesting side note, and people have asked me about Operation High Jump a lot, which was Admiral Byrd, the youngest admiral in the history of the United States Navy, probably our greatest explorer of all time. He kept doing missions down to Antarctica starting in 1928. So he does the North Pole in 1926. In a rickety plane, because we didn't have very good planes in 1926, no pressurized cabins by a long shot. So in 1928, he starts doing missions down in Antarctica, again, looking for something. So whoever was paying him well, and he had complete control. Plus, he flew his own planes. He kept doing his thing down there, but they had to take a break during World War II. Nobody was down there in Antarctica during World War II except one group. And you can probably guess who that was. That was the Nazis. The Nazis were down there during World War II. Why? Well, watch Indiana Jones, the movie. They were everywhere. They were looking for anything they could as an advantage. And if there was something secret and cool happening down there, that's where they were going. So the rumor was that they had a base down there, and that the Nazis had camped out whatever they were using down there. They weren't going anywhere. They were sort of entrenched even after the war had ended, because the war in Europe ended in 1943, 44, something. I can't remember when VE Day was, but it didn't really matter, because in 1946, after we had the Allies had wrapped up everything, including the Japan stuff, Admiral Byrd led a full-blown carrier fleet that was used in World War II, 5,000 plus men, support ships, the whole 9 yards, down to Antarctica in 1946, called Operation High Jump. To this day, we don't know exactly what he was trying to root out down there. Was it the Nazis? Was it tied with alien technology? Were things shot down? I don't know. But all I can tell you is that from the time, after it was over, because it was over fairly quickly, when he finally did that great television interview in 1954, whatever was done in 1946 during High Jump was taken care of. because he didn't mention it. He didn't seem to be worried about it. And by 1954, it was all about the corporations. It was all about
the chronoscope, the chronograph. What was it called?
Yeah, it's the show, and I pronounced it wrong on the clues, unfortunately, because it's way before my time. Well, not way before, but before my time. It was called the Longines Chronoscope, which is kind of like an equivalent to like a 60 Minutes show. Sure. Where you had some high-level journalists on there that were talking to him. And yeah, when he comes on in 1954, he didn't have a care in the world. It was like, oh yeah, we're just going to go down there and make money. Everybody's set up to down there. United States, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, Argentina, Chile, New Zealand, Australia, they're all down there. We're all getting ready. And in fact, he was even worried. He mentioned during the interview, he's going, man, I hope we don't end up fighting over the resources. And then, he goes down and he says that, oh yeah, we're prepping for the next mission, which happened to be the very next year, which was 1959-56, which happened to be the last official mission, Operation Deep Freeze. And then whatever happens during Operation Deep Freeze, that's when it all changed. And I believe that is after almost 30 years of flying around looking for the ends of Antarctica, the ends of the world. That's when they found it.
So where does the Antarctic Treaty come?
Almost immediately afterwards. So if Operation Deep Freeze ends in 1956, they start working on legislation immediately to where it became ironclad in 1959. So all these weird moves. So the treaty ends in 1956. And then for whatever reason, the Soviet Union and the United States ramp up their rocket program in 1957 right away. They start firing nukes. 1958, after like the third shot, NASA is formed immediately after the third shot, which makes sense because it's like, okay, megaton weapons are not doing anything up there. We've got to control the sky starting now. Which, okay, how do you control the sky? Well, we're going to have to come up with a space program. And NASA then became the gatekeeper. 1959, NASA announces the Van Allen radiation belts. Coincidentally, the same year they announced the Van Allen radiation belts, which says, oh, by the way, nobody should ever go up there because it's super dangerous and lethal. Oh yeah, and by the way, we're sealing off Antarctica forever. Nobody pay attention to that though. And those two things, you're sealing off the upper edge and the outer edge simultaneously. That for me just screamed structure. Not only that, but you combine that with the fact that it goes against everything that we are as a capitalistic civilization where greed and power and money rule the world. And you're telling me that no corporation, no matter how much money they have, not only cannot go down and do any work in Antarctica, but they aren't even allowed to legislate. They aren't even allowed to lobby. I joked about the other night where I said, look, if I owned ExxonMobil, how hard would it be to go to my friends at the New York Times and run a weekly piece every week and say, here's why it's good.
Lobby.
Yeah, just here's why it's good for Exxon to be in Antarctica. Here's why it's good for why isn't anybody doing that? Because they can't. Because when you're at that high level, you want to do it, and then somebody from national security, who's kind of monitoring what you're doing anyway, comes to you. I'm sorry, from the DOD comes to you and says, oh yeah, by the way, it's a matter of national security. We're not going to tell you what's going on there, but it's super secret. Just stay away. And
to bring you back on, you've made the assumption from them locking down Antarctica and locking down the sky.
Yes.
That they're doing exactly that. They're locking it down, but that kind of implies that we know where we are. So would you assume from that the powers that should not be have a really accurate representation of our world? Or to put it more succinctly, has our world been mapped out?
I think they know a lot. Okay, there's a couple ways you could talk about this, and I know there's been some disputes when it comes to the mapping. I think before 1956, they had a pretty good idea, but unfortunately, because we didn't have the technology to do anything about it, honestly, without the internal combustion engine, who cares? Because you're not going to be able to reach the borders anyway. You just do not have the technology to do it. But once they got up high enough, and I'll use the Matt Boylan line, you've got to get up high enough to figure out where you are. Once they figured out it, at the very least, it's not a globe. Now, whether it has a barrier, a soft barrier, a hard barrier, are there more, places like this outside? We don't know. But what we can tell you is whatever the world really is, they have gone to extreme lengths to make sure we don't know about it. And most of it's because of omissions. Again, why would...
Before the why, how?
How do you hide it? How do you hide the world?
How have they hidden
mostly with money, more than anything else. And that is a series of negative reinforcements that you can put under the cloak of national security. With Antarctica, that's easy. you keep everybody in the loop, and that is all the countries that signed onto the treaty, and there's over 50 of them now. You put it under an environmental blanket and say, oh, it's pristine, it's for science, we don't want anybody down there, and that's fine now. Or that would have been fine in the 90s, the 2000s, but in 1959, environmentalism wasn't even a word. You got to remember, Greenpeace wasn't even founded until 1971, and that was just a couple guys in some tie-dye shirts and a raft. They didn't care about Antarctica. They couldn't even have gotten there if they wanted to. So so the Antarctic Treaty is one way with money, but the big money sink, that of course is creating NASA, creating all the space agencies, and then unfortunately spending billions, if in adjusted dollars, probably over $1 trillion now, to create basically, again, I got to steal from Matt on this one, which is you can't just hand people the picture. That's the biggest. You have to create the most expensive fake picture of all time, and that is, how do you do that? It's like, well, you can't hand people a picture of the Earth from space and say, oh, here's a picture of the Earth from space, because they're going to ask you, well, how'd you take the shot? So you have to create a rocket program to simulate the illusion of actually a real space program, which is why, by the way, why the Russians quit. A lot of people don't remember that when the Americans finally supposedly got to the moon in 1969, the Russian space program just threw in the towel. I said, oh, that's it. They made it there first. Let's pack it up. Just shut it all down, and they never did anything ever. What, that's where the Cold War is going to end, right then and there? No, of course not. It would have been like, okay, how many people do the Russians have? How many is there a potential of a Cold War on the moon? Is it base against base? Are people knocking each other the flags over? No, it never happened. And again,
you touched on this earlier when you were talking about the one photograph.
Yeah.
Now that's sort of buried in a million composites when you do a search. But can you maybe talk us through what a composite image is, and
Sure.
B, how it's been used to convince us that we're on a globe? I mean, as an aside note, in your clues, you said that maybe with the rats or the mice example, that it explores its cage. And I was going to say, before we leave Antarctica or the Antarctica topic, is the Antarctic Treaty maybe a way of putting a cage in place?
It is, but it's an invisible cage. Let me come back to that. Remind me of that question in a second.
Okay.
A quick backstory on the composites versus what they pass off as an actual picture,
Sure.
And that was because this, again, you talk about hiding in plain sight. This whole concept was in front of my face 15 years ago or 16 years ago now in 2000, when I was trying to come up with some background graphics for all the computers in the tech support department, which I ran. And that was, okay, I want some pictures of the Earth. That's it's the iconic thing, right? So I go online, and granted, it was thinner then than it is now, but I'm typing in, the Earth from space.
Earth from space, yeah.
And literally, now you get at least different variations, but back then it was literally one picture over and over and over again. It was just in different resolutions, and it was the Apollo 17 picture. And I'm staring at this, and I was pretty good at Boolean strings, and so I was typing in all the different, Earth from space, satellite picture of the Earth from space, or space picture, Earth picture. I just kept going on, and it just kept popping up the same things, and I was just getting so irritated. I was going, NASA, you suck. How in the world do you have an internet presence this bad? Granted, it was only 2000, but still, there was a lot still going on the internet in 2000. So it did not even occur to me why that happened. So flash forward some years, and you've probably seen the video yourself, where the very first iPhone, where the guy they wanted to do the same thing. It's like, oh, for the first iPhone, we should put a nice picture of the globe on the iPhone. That should be the startup picture.
Yeah, the lock screen.
They didn't like any of the pictures that were out there. They had to create a composite on their own to put on there, and they worked with NASA to create the image. And it's like, oh yeah, a composite. So people don't know what a composite is. It is exactly what it sounds like, and that is, it's a composition. It is a series of pictures, different pictures, and some photoshopping that's stitch it all together, and you can throw it out there as the real thing. But you have to tell people that it's composite. And there have been nothing but composites, and we know this because nothing but composites since 1972. So even as little as like 2013, if you typed in the Earth from space, you'd see that picture, that Antarctica piece of crap. And then, oh, by the way, don't think that's a coincidence that you would show the only continent that they showed in its entirety was Antarctica. I mean, this is
Right.
an American space program. You're really not going to get a shot at the States? No, come on. It's a bunch of crap. So there's all these composites all the way up until this year. And I'm sorry, all the way up until last year. And then for whatever reason, and again, the Flat Earth movement has got to take some credit for this, because the NASA is dancing to our music, which is in the summer of 2015, they release a blue marble shot. And they kind of had to do what we were talking about earlier, which is they couldn't just release it. They couldn't just say, oh, by the way, this shot, they couldn't just sneak it into the internet, but they announced it. So NASA comes out and they said, oh, yeah, by the way, this is the second blue marble shot we ever taken in 43 years. Nothing to see here. And the White House tweets it. Obama, I put it in one of my shows. He actually talks about it in a speech, not in the Oval Office, but in a different thing. And it's like, okay, you're admitting it, that you've only taken 2 shots of the Earth from space. And then, of course, it started rolling from there, because then they released that kind of time-lapse thingy with the moon traveling in front of the satellite. Oh, yeah, by the way, here's a satellite at 1 million miles away that we forgot to tell you about. And here's the moon passing in front. I mean, honestly, that was abysmally bad production value. South Park could have done a better moon in front of the Earth than they did. And then just a couple weeks later, they did the shot from the moon, where they showed the moon's surface, which basically was just the old JAXA footage. Most people don't even remember the JAXA probe, but I do, because the Japanese space agency, JAXA, they supposedly sent HD cameras to the moon, circling around and come back. I was going, right. I remember when they launched. And I go, right on. They can take those HD cameras and they can finally do a full-blown shot when they're coming back to the Earth. And here's the Earth coming for you and getting bigger. Nope. The Earth rises in the distance. They come up on it and just barely getting into focus, and that's the end of the footage. And you never heard about it. And then the JAXA ended up releasing it on YouTube, and I put that in a couple of things that it was just horrible. Production value is awful. So sorry.
We talk about production value, which is bringing me nicely on to my next question, which is, how does the TV, and probably more than anybody, Hollywood, actually program us with the illusion of the globe?
Oh, perfect. That's a great question. And by the way, he did not send me a list of questions. So if he blindsides me, you'll know, because I'll get kind of a frowny face when I do it. So what happens is Hollywood does it 2 ways. And it was my first clue. And I had to do it. And people said, oh, that was your weakest clue. I'm just going, no, it isn't. It's a preface clue, is what it is. So Hollywood gets you in 2 ways. The first way is they reinforce you with just about every type of science fiction movie. Forget about your fantasy science fiction like Star Trek and Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica, and those are all fine and dandy. It's the pseudo movies that get you, and that is like, and they did some a bunch of years ago, like Mission to Mars, Red Planet, the Gravity, The Martian, 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's sort of pseudoscience. It's like the near future, or in Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey. All those movies, what they do is they reinforce the globe subliminally, because what you're watching is, it's like, it doesn't matter if you believe the movie or not, as long as your train of thought is out there somewhere. It's, oh, they're doing something on Mars, I'm on a globe. They're doing something on Saturn, I'm on a globe. Everything you say, and even in NASA is doing that to a certain degree, and that is, oh, the face on Mars. Doesn't matter if you believe in the face on Mars. That's not the goal. As long as you're thinking about the face on Mars, you're on a globe, which means there is space. And the second part that Hollywood does, which of course is a giant omission, is the fact, again, he doth protest too much, and that is, they have gone way out of their way to make sure there has never even been a straight-to-DVD movie about the Apollo programs. Ever. There's only been 2.
No, that's not quite true, is it? There was a special that was Tom Hanks from, what was it, Earth to the Moon or something like that?
Ah, yes, and I did cover that in the clues, but it wasn't a major Hollywood film. So let me clarify. So the greatest achievement in the history of mankind, and the first movie that was ever made about it was The Right Stuff in 1983. A great cast, astronaut recruitment movie.
Really boring.
Really boring. Well, it wasn't actually that boring. It made quite a bit of money.
Well, it was an interesting story, but it was nothing to do with NASA.
It was nothing to do with the moon. It was like, okay, here's how we train the astronauts. And it was a great cast. In fact, it would have won Best Picture, believe it or not, but it lost to Gandhi, of all things. And of course, Gandhi was going to win. But it was set up perfectly for the sequel, because after 3 hours, they were in low Earth orbit. It's like right on. You can use the whole cast, the whole production team. You can go right into the sequel. Never happened. And then then there was just crickets until 1995, I believe, when Apollo 13 came out. 13, yeah. With Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon and Gary Sinise and Bill Paxton. And but that was set in a capsule. It was the only Apollo mission that didn't go do anything near the moon. It was like, oh, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. It's like, okay, whatever. And then after that, there was never anything after that, with the exception of the Tom Hanks production. No coincidence there, because he had done Apollo 13. He knew all the guys. He used some of the same crew, and they made a little documentary. And I watched the whole thing from the Earth to the Moon, and I watched the whole 10-part series, and it was horrible. It was awful. And you're watching it, you're just going, oh my. In fact, even the making of was more telling than anything, because it showed you some of the special effects they were using. But the point is there's never been ever, again, not even straight to DVD. And for those people, do not quote me like Moon, the movie, or Apollo 18, because there was no Apollo 18, and that was about little crab monsters that were eating astronauts. There's never been a movie made, a major Hollywood movie made about the Apollo missions, ever. How does that happen? If there is a nickel to be made in Hollywood, I mean, for God's sakes, they made a sequel to Paul Blart Mall Cop. We make sequels to everything, and you can't even tell me that nobody's going to make even a failed movie. That's the big tell, and that is, what, a studio isn't going to make a movie. It's not going to get shut down, and it's not going to do anything. It's going to be in the DVD bin, straight to DVD, a B movie. There's not even one of those. How does that happen? Nobody gets the rights to this. And when Stanton Friedman said during the debate that I had with him, which was really more of a discussion, when he said, oh, they don't make the movies because it'd be boring, nobody would watch it, I was going, oh, don't you dare use that logic. We make America, especially
achievements. I'd be glued to it.
Oh, yeah. United States makes a ton of crappy movies. You cannot tell me, especially the older generation, they would have eaten that stuff up. Especially, take your pick. You could have picked all sorts of actors to have been in. Actors would have lined up for that thing, which is why Apollo 13 had such a great cast. People just chomping at the bit. Anyway.
I mean, we have a modern day version, if you want to call it that, in the form of the ISS. But you had a statement given to you, did you not, from an industrial valve and seal expert?
Yeah. He came out, and I still don't know his actual name. Or actually, I may do, but I think I deliberately forgot it. Where he comes out and he goes, look, there are not many companies. There's like 5 or 6 companies in the world that specialize in industrial seals and valves. And by that, he goes, especially when it comes to military contracts, it's no different than the people that come up with the door seals and the valves for everything for like submarines, because they have to be airtight. He goes, those same companies are the ones that have to supply, whether they're the high bidder or the low bidder, they're the ones that have to supply everything for the International Space Station. And the more he looked at the International Space Station, the more it just puzzled him. He was, how is this thing working? He's going, from a SEAL standpoint, there are so many things wrong with the International Space Station. How is this thing staying up in the air? Why are these astronauts not in spacesuits constantly? Why aren't there constant repairs being made? Why isn't there a full-blown machine shop up there that's making parts all the time, because they have to do swap out and maintenance? It's no different than for people that don't know maintenance schedules for like airplanes. It's different than cars. With cars, you can just wait till something breaks or wears out, but you can't take a chance with airplanes. It's all based on date. So it doesn't matter. If the part still looks good at 3 months, you're swapping that part out. And then after a certain number of time, you got to swap out a whole bunch of stuff simultaneously.
And there's severe penalties as well if they don't.
Yeah. And he goes, and he goes, with a space station, that's mission critical. He goes, where is the big swap out? Where are the parts? He goes, who's doing the maintenance? He goes, whenever you watch these guys that are doing the stuff in the International Space Station, you don't see anybody turning wrenches and do it. They should be in suit. There should be a team up there constantly every day. In fact, the Navy guys were quick to jump on that, which they said, look, all the Navy ships and the submarines have full-blown machine shops, and every single day they are swapping parts out. They're constantly doing maintenance. He goes, the ISS, they apparently have no cares in the world after 15 years, and they're floating around. Don't get me going on a rant here, but the fact that they don't have a care in the world. It's khakis and polo shirts and socks all day long. Yeah. In fact, when your countrymen, when the Brit went up there the other last month, and they open up the hatch and he's coming in with khakis and polo shirt and socks, I was going, what dress code is this? Why isn't he wearing a suit? It's a hatch. You're going from docking thing, from a docking procedure. Is everything equalized? Is everything okay? You don't know.
Problem? Nah, he's in his khakis. He's all right.
Oh my God. I've watching this as going, and again, that was another dancing to the music bit, because we were saying, especially me, where I said that I go, look how the United Kingdom has completely avoided the space program. Why? Because they know better. They don't want to be a part of this. It's like, I loved, and I don't know if you're a Bond fan, I loved the Sean Connery Diamonds Are Forever scene from James Bond.
Talk us through it, just because a lot of people may not have seen it, but it is comical. Just talk us through it.
He's running through. It's Sean Connery as James Bond, and he's running through. He's escaping the bad guys, and he's running through different Hollywood sets. And one of the Hollywood sets is a moon backdrop where there's a capsule and a moon buggy and these astronauts, right? And the control room, the guy going get him, and the astronauts can't catch him because they're still in character and they're running in slow motion, even though he's just running around him. And it's the big joke. That's the big jab. And he steals their moon buggy and he leaves. And that was the big joke, which was, how easy is it to fake the moon landing? And it was very easy by comparison. All you had to do was omit a few things. So
I was going to maybe come back to the point I underlined earlier, which was about being lab rats as a result of the Antarctic Treaty. But I was going to kind of link that back into maybe proof beyond Richard Byrd. And is there any other people or references that you've had to give us an idea of the shape?
Not really. I mean, the stuff that we have to go off now is pretty limited. I still like the fact that even though I know we're trying to redefine it and we're trying to redefine scale, and I know that Tiger Dan has really been banging his head on the desk because he's been trying to rewrite the map and he's having a tough time with it. So I'm sorry if he's listening. I know it's not easy. But the fact that the UN flag, which is identical to the azimuthal map, which is identical to the flat Earth map, the UN flag was designed, it was finished in 1946. I thought that was very telling because you got to remember Admiral Byrd was still looking in 1955. So that let me know that whoever the powers that be, and by that, the super rich, the royals and the governments, they had a pretty good idea. I think they had the old maps, and they still do. But again, it just because I joked about this some months ago, which was just because you're the king of France in 1700 and you have an old map of what the world probably looks like, what are you going to do about it? You got no way to prove it out for yourself. Yeah, you could send expeditions, but it probably wouldn't be the best idea to try to go out in Antarctica in wooden ships. So as far as the shape goes, I still like the UN flag, the azimuthal map on the ground. Whether or not it's perfectly flat or it has warps to it, I like the Orlando Ferguson map of the 1800s, with the flat and stationary Earth map. I still think it's covered. I think it's covered with the dome. The arc of the dome is really throwing people because we don't know. Is it shallow? Like a sports stadium, like maybe only 500 miles high, or does it go up kind of like a snow globe? Is it several thousand miles high?
Also, back to the maps. I'm interjecting a bit here, and I'll try and keep it short because you're the guest, of course. But from what I can establish, we've got Al-Biruni and his map, which is about 1,000 years old, and we've pretty much got an overlay of that that's been not changed massively. I know you're saying it has had alterations, but we've pretty much had the same representation of flat Earth for about 1,000 years. Would it make sense to you that they would know that it's incorrect and hide it in plain sight so that we found an incorrect map and then only make accurate maps that wrap around balls?
It's possible. The thought as of like last week was that, maybe the UN flag with its glaring omission of Antarctica, Antarctica isn't on the UN flag, even though it should be. And people saying, oh, it's the only way you could draw the map of the UN flag. It's no, you couldn't. You could draw several different globes and put the Antarctica on one and the other one would be fine. But yeah, it's possible. I still think when I stumbled across the Al-Biruni thing, which was really, really interesting in my opinion, because again, if you look at the list of world map projections on Wikipedia, again, none of this information is secret. It's all out there. Anybody can check it, which again, why it's been resonating so well. It was interesting that of all the projections that are on there, and there are a ton of them, that was the only one that had notations next to it. Like everything else was like boring, nothing happening. And this one, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, the USGS uses it in its catalog, and it's the UN flag, and it was designed by a 1,000-year-old Persian scientist. And it's tied to the flat Earth in some ways. Like there's like 4 things, and they're not small things. And it's kind of like an orgy of evidence. It's almost, it is too good to be true. It is, but at the same time, I still believe, especially with the plane routes, the plane routes was a kind of a big thing for me, and that was, and it wasn't
going to take you from this.
Oh, okay. The plane routes was kind of a big thing for me, and that I didn't come up with it, and it was I can't remember if it was the German guy who came up with it first, but other people have noticed. I'm sure. In fact, I'm sure that anybody in the Southern Hemisphere has noticed, especially since the. I had that travel agent give me that statement where if you're booking travel, for people in the Southern Hemisphere, she was getting complaints every week. She's going, why does it take so long to get from here to here? All we have to do is take a straight shot here. Why do we have to go all the way up to the Middle East? Why in the world, if you're going from Rio to Sydney, Australia, why are you going to Los Angeles or San Francisco or Dallas or any of these places? And people say, oh, you're picking up passengers. I'm going, and double the flight time? And triple the flight time. It didn't. That was one of those things that I was trying to work through. One of the early things, and you don't know until you type it into any travel site. And that is, if the flight should only take 12 hours, why do most of the flights take 40? And you say there's like one nonstop, and the other 50 are connections, and they're usually double connections and triple connections. There was a couple that were like, they took 52 hours. It's good. Nobody, it doesn't take 3 days to get anywhere, not for a major airport. So, but anyway, but the flights were very, very interesting because, again, on a flat map, those super arcing angles, which are usually on a globe or the Mercator map, they turn into those shallow dog legs or an exact straight line. And they don't, what are the odds that would happen? What are the odds that you would have a map projection that's how they would line up? And some people say, well, it's a coincidence, or it's just the way the projection's laid out. I was going, yeah, but there's too many things. Let me put it this way. When I started getting into this, after a while, I had to change my tune from how do I prove it's a globe to I started playing devil's advocate and started saying, all right, if it was me, how would I hide the world? How could you do it? If you had to hide the world from the general population, could you pull it off? And between the flights and the NASA thing and the Antarctica thing, I mean, they all kept pointing to the same thing. And if any one of those things would have pointed to something else completely different, I would have said, okay, then we've got a problem here. But they kept pointing the same thing, and that is, why would you do that? You would do that to hide the world. And one of the biggest ones was the flights in the Southern Hemisphere. And that is, you would make as many connections as you could. If you didn't do connections, you would do those hidden fuel stops, which I think is intriguing. The fact that technically a nonstop flight is still a nonstop flight, even if you land, get fuel, but nobody comes on or off the plane. It's still considered a nonstop flight. And I thought that was brilliant. And then the third one, of course, was the GPS system, which I'm still getting people that come at me. They're incredulous. They're like, well, the GPS system's a land-based system, and of course we're not going to track all these things. I was going, yeah, but it's called a global positioning system. It was designed by the United States government. They don't do anything small ever, and they supposedly have 24 satellites that are circling the globe. If you have 24 satellites that are circling the globe and it's called a global positioning system, and you have basically unlimited funds to spend on the system because the military would have a vested interest in tracking everything that flies, why are the three biggest oceans in the world not tracked? And that being the South Atlantic, the South Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. Why would you not track these things? They're glaringly not tracked. I mean, they're not even hiding it to where, I mean, I joked about it. It's like, look, I've got some solutions for you. At least fake some latitude and longitude. Don't show the plane just blinking off, and then when you look up the plane, it says, oh yeah, by the way, we're approximating its location, we're estimating its location. Oh yeah, those planes, they disappeared. Don't worry about those. It was incredible. So sorry,
the world as we know is given to us pretty much by the map makers and the USGS. But you've correct me if I'm wrong, you've spoken to surveyors. Can you sort of tie those two concepts, the USGS?
Oh yeah, the surveyor. I had a slew of people call me at the end of 2015. And I was looking for them too. I mean, I was looking for official whistleblowers, but I know that if a NASA whistleblower comes out, there's nothing I can do because there's nobody can protect them. Same thing with the United States Air Force, because a lot of the NASA people come from the United States Air Force. But on top of the military people from the Navy and the Army and the Marine Corps that I had coming out, I had a career surveyor. Now, I also had I know Patricia had a structural engineer, and there was other engineers that came out. But the surveyor was very, very interesting to me, because what they did, this isn't a surveyor that just shoots houses, maps out your house for a foundation. This guy was doing big tracts of land, 20 plus miles, car factories, big assembly lines, airport runways.
Can you break it down in sort of actual miles for people watching?
Oh, okay. So if you're doing like an assembly line for like Toyota, he did one, I'm pretty sure, for Toyota. Assembly lines are very, very long buildings, series of buildings, because the car it hasn't changed much since the Henry Ford idea. And that is, the car starts here as this big chunk of metal, and it gets all this stuff added on, but it goes down 20 miles at least. And
so the building itself that they're building to house the production line is 20 miles long.
Well, the complex is 20 miles. I mean, I don't think it's
sure. The level ground that they've got to actually
level ground.
So those buildings on is 20 miles.
Yeah, they're shooting big tracts of land. And what he was saying was, what he thought was very, very interesting. Again, why the pilots missed it, but why he missed it was, he's going, when you're shooting tracts of land, the surveyor's job is to make sure, you're mapping out exactly the elevation and how the land lays out. And he goes, when you're taught to be a surveyor, they tell you the same thing up front. They go, the first basic rule is you treat your project, whatever you're setting up for, be it Toyota or an airport, you treat it like the world is perfectly flat. Now, when they tell them that, they're not actually saying that the world is perfectly flat. They're just saying, no, just treat all your projects like they're perfectly flat. The problem with that is that eventually you're going to have to deal with the curve, because of my project, which is, let's say, a 10-mile square, and your project, which is another 10-mile square. Eventually, our projects are going to butt up against each other. Imagine a city. Well, that was a great example. And that is from one end of a city to another. There's a whole bunch of projects between one end and the other. He goes, you can't tell me that over those 20 miles, or whatever it is, however long the city is, that you're not having to deal with curvature eventually, because it's 8 inches per mile squared. So eventually somebody's going to have to deal with curvature. And even he did it for 32 years, and he retired not that long ago. And he goes, not only did the curvature never come into question, but it was never even accidentally brought up in conversation, which meant that, like, let's say you were working with a guy on another project. Well, all these projects have to butt up against each other. And
it never causes a problem.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on. No, I said the curvature never causes a problem.
Okay, sorry. I was getting a weird thing, like my camera was coming out for a second. All right, as long as we're cool, we're cool. All right.
Yeah, we're talking curvature and flat Earth.
All right, we're talking flat Earth. So the analogy is this, and that is, I don't know what the equivalent over in Britain is, but we have crackers over here, these little perfectly flat square crackers called wheat thins. And my analogy is, imagine if you try to cover a basketball or a round surface with these square objects. You could do it, but there's going to be gaps. The only way you can cover a curved surface is with curved objects, because that's how you have to lay it out. It's got to be contoured. You can't lay it out. You can't cover a curved surface with perfectly square objects all the time, because eventually there are going to be gaps, and there weren't any gaps. And he goes, even by accident, let's say you were doing your project and I was doing my project, and we butt up against each other. One of us forgets to account for curvature. Oh, hey, and that would be the accusation. It's like, oh, you forgot to account for curvature. No, you were oh, I get it. He goes, that conversation never, ever happened. He goes, it was just a theory. It was just something they brought up. When you first start out as a surveyor, they tell you about it. In fact, he was told many, many times when he was younger, when he was in his 20s, when he asked, he goes, what about the curvature? And they all said the same thing. It said, don't worry about it, and they meant that literally, because you never had to take into account. And I thought that was fascinating, because from a surveyor's standpoint, they treat the world like it's perfectly flat, literally. And you can't do it if the world has got a curve to it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Lego bricks example. It's like, it's always going to be working on flat, but if you get a ball of Lego, your bricks ain't going to work properly.
There you go. Yeah, Lego's a great example, because there's no such thing as a curved surface in the Lego world. You can't pull it off. And that's exactly what he was saying. And we see that time and time again with everybody that I've talked to. They've all said the same thing. And I know you'll probably ask me about other guys, but to summarize kind of what they all been saying, and that is, we've all heard of the curvature. We don't use it in our daily jobs. It's just something we hear about. it's kind of like it's assumed, but in reality, it's a myth. It's just never ever used. They all said the same thing. It's like it's not. They don't even really mention it in the manual. It's just something that's kind of passed down from generation to generation. It's the curvature thing. Are you going to use it in your thing today? No, I'm not going to use it today, or ever. I mean,
I spoke to Jaron a couple of weeks ago, and Jaron had done several experiments using lasers to actually prove out flat Earth. Yeah. And I was quick to point out, I don't know if I'm allowed to call him this. Is it Sean? Your Navy guy?
Wait, well, you mean the military guy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Sean McCrary. Yeah, no, he's out.
Yeah. Well, Sean had basically scaled up, if you like, what Jaron had done across, I think it was 5 mile stretch of water with his laser. Well, Sean's doing it in a much better way, if you like. Can you talk us through what Sean told you on?
Sean McCrary. We initially introduced him as Robert because we gave him every chance to be anonymous. But
sure.
He's smart because he's very clever. Because if if you're a military guy, he's in the United States Navy for 10 years. He wants to go career, but you can get thrown out of the military for on a Section 8, which is basically that you're insane, right? But that was a joke from some of our things that our television shows over here. But it's a great story. But let's say the military wants to come at him and say, we're going to throw at you because you think the Earth is flat. Well, what a great news story that would be. Because every psychological profile would say that he was sane, but he's saying, no, from a practical standpoint, I think it's flat. But basically what he came out and said was, because he was a Sparrow missile system instructor, and he had access to technology that most people don't have, including 2-inch beam radars. Because the Sparrow missile system, you have to paint the target literally. So if you're on your ship and you're trying to hit a ship that's 60 miles away, you have to paint it. You have to literally hit it with a straight beam, a 2-inch beam. And then the missile has to kind of pick up the frequency that the beam is reflecting off the ship, and it hits it. It's not like you're shooting the beam up and bouncing down. No, it's a straight point-to-point shot. And he goes 60 miles. He goes, that's thousands of feet worth of curvature. He goes, there's no way if the Earth is curved that we should be able to paint that target. And you can talk about refraction all you want and illusion. It's like, no. He goes, we're not painting illusions. We're hitting targets at 60 miles. And he goes, that's just the numbers I'm going to tell you. They're farther than that, but the rest is classified. He goes, there is no way that a 2-inch beam radar can hit a target at 60 miles consistently. In fact, if it wasn't consistent, you wouldn't even use the system. Not only that, but he said the firing solutions, because we're not talking about snipers that are shooting a meager 1 mile on a good day. We're talking about 60 miles with a missile. He goes, the firing solutions aren't taking into account the Coriolis effect, which is the spinning of the Earth. That isn't taken into account either. And then for the icing on the cake for him, he comes out and he says, oh yeah, by the way, because the maps in the Southern Hemisphere appear to be completely wrong. He goes, for whatever reason, he goes, destinations do not make sense. The time allotted for us to go to certain places are never right. And he goes, we're talking about precision stuff nowadays. And he goes, in the GPS system, he goes, we don't even use it. That's a defense system. And we're not using it. They said we're not using it as our primary navigation. It's still charts and pointing things. And when you're mapping the stuff, and then he goes, they're always straight lines. Always. Sort
of triple proof guy, wasn't he?
He was great. I love the fact that he came out, and he even came out and vetted himself. So he comes out and he takes his own video of him flying in a helicopter.
On a helicopter.
Yeah, the helicopter landing on the Iwo Jima, which is where he was stationed. And then I didn't even ask him to do this. He takes the picture from inside. I thought he was going to get in trouble for a second there. From inside the Sparrow System missile training room, and where he actually writes down on a cocktail napkin and wax marker, flat Earth, and then writes my name just to make sure that that people know where he is, who he's talking to. He flips the napkin over, turns it on himself. It's like you couldn't ask, and people are still saying, no, it's not real. It's like, what more do you want from this guy?
The guy's definitely legit, but
absolutely,
such a high standard of proof. Can we go through them in a bit more detail one at a time? So if I'm explaining it wrong, just correct me.
No, go ahead.
But yeah, so you've got the radar scans around it to find targets, and when it finds a target, and we'll say this target's 60 nautical miles on the horizon, it then has something called narrow radar, which is about 2-inch wide, and it is direct line of sight. In other words, it has to actually make contact with the item it's looking at in order to guide in a missile. So it has to literally paint the target, meaning put something on that target. Is that correct?
That is, yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly how it works. And I think it would be, I don't know if it was nautical miles. Nautical miles is slightly longer than regular miles. I think it was 60 land miles, but it doesn't really matter because either way, it's thousands of feet below the curvature. So to what you're saying, that boat, not only should you not be able to hit it, you shouldn't even be able to see it because it should be on the other side of the curvature. So unless you're telling me that beam radar is following the curvature of the Earth, and it
can't. That's not how it works. So
no. Plus on top of that, it's like, okay, you're following the curvature of the Earth, but how are you aiming it? Because if you can't see the ship, how exactly are you throwing that beam down there in the first place? You're just going to just throw it down there, and then what's the reflection off of it? You can't get the reflection from the ship, so you're just firing the missile up there and then hoping that the missile picks up on it. No, that's not how it works.
There's essentially nothing that can debunk it, and the technology behind what's happening is solid and proven, and works.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, the second thing was the Coriolis effect, which I know for any diehard flat earthers is fairly easy to understand once you've wrapped your head around it. But for anybody who may be tuning into this that has no idea even what the Coriolis effect is, can you explain what the Coriolis effect is and how Sean essentially debunked it with the technology they use daily?
There's 3 different layers of the Coriolis effect. The 2 I'll do really shortly. One is the flowing of water, either clockwise or counterclockwise, which if you want to look at a very, very interesting stuff, I think it's Learning Something Every Day. I can't remember that guy. He's a really popular YouTube guy where he set up him and his friend to do pools of water. And it was so subtle that the toilet's flushing. He goes, absolutely is not true. He goes, and he's not a flat earther. They set up these kiddie pools.
Smarter every day.
The what? Smarter Every Day? Did you watch this one? The one I'm talking about where they set up the kiddie
all of them.
Okay. The kiddie pools was brilliant because they had to use eyedroppers of ink. And they said only then could you detect any subtle change as far as the Coriolis effect went, as far as it goes with water. The second part would be stars in the sky. And that is, do stars in the sky spin differently? One goes clockwise, the other goes counterclockwise. And then the third part has to do with ballistics. And the ballistics thing is the really one that I've been focusing on because it's physical. It has to do with things that are down on the ground. And I have yet to find, and I have talked to, we'll end with Sean on this, but I have talked to, let's see, a Marine, United States Marine Corps sniper instructor for 3 years said that the Coriolis effect is not used in the manuals, which is interesting because mainstream media will tell you that it is. 2 different artillery guys, one in Fallujah, one in Afghanistan. One is actually a radar operator for the artillery section in Afghanistan. And they both said that they're shooting out at 30 miles and that they're not accounting for Coriolis effect at all, which makes sense because if you're not doing it at 1 mile, you're certainly not doing it at 30 miles. The torpedo guy from the submarine, he's shooting at torpedoes at 25 miles. And even though it's underwater, you still have to take into account for it. Granted, it's a lot slower. That's not there. And then Sean, who's shooting missiles at the Sparrow missile system at least 60 miles. And he's saying, look, the firing solution, which means firing the missile up there, he goes, you do not take into account the curvature of the Earth. And that makes so much sense because in order to even figure out the curvature of the Earth, you'd have to take a compass reading because the Coriolis effect, if the Earth was spinning and if you're firing a projectile, you would have to figure out where you were facing. Not just, you're facing, the target, but just, okay, are we north? Are we south? Are we east? Are we west? And what variation are we? And what part of the globe are you on? Because remember, if you're on a globe and the Earth's spinning at the North Pole, you're not spinning at all. But at the equator, you're spinning the maximum amount. So you'd have to take all these things into account. Nobody's doing any of that. They're not.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure I read a tweet from Neil deGrasse Tyson that said that some of the football players did.
How dare you? How dare you bring that up? Okay, first of all, I follow football, and that's why I'm wearing my Seattle Seahawks hat. Go Hawks, because they're still in the playoffs, at least for this week. And that is, Neil deGrasse Tyson, desperate man. And don't think for a second that I don't know that you're running from me, because you will not interview me. You were supposed to be on the frickin' Art Bell show with me. Oh, yeah, absolutely he did. He turned us down. That's the reason why the Stanton Friedman thing happened, because Neil deGrasse wouldn't do it. He won't do it. And it was such an innocent letter. I read it, which was, would you be willing to go on the show and talk about the shape of the earth with Mark Sargent? How much more innocent? It's pretty agreeable. No, he's not going to. There's no way. So he goes on and he tweets the NFL, the National Football League here in America, when, in fact, go figure, when the Seattle Seahawks lost to the Cincinnati Bengals kicked a field goal and it hit the upright and went in, and they scored. And he tweets, the reason why it hit the upright and went in was because of the Coriolis
effect.
I can't begin to tell you how irritated I was because, well, one, because we lost the game, but two, because you're talking about an oblong football spinning end to end because of a kicker at 40 yards. 40 yards, the Coriolis effect is going to affect how that kick. Oh, it's just aggravating. Plus, he was just wasting his breath because he's a nerd. Why are you telling jocks, nerd stuff, nerd science to the NFL Football League? They're all meatheads.
Oh, they're going to love the Coriolis effect.
Oh yeah, they're all into science.
It's the talk. That's all.
I see professional football players in their towels. They're just reading through physics all day long. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
I mean, talk of the media. I mean, will the media ever back the fact that there is no curve?
I still believe that they're going to try to take control of this thing sooner or later because the problem with their invention of social media. Social media was initially designed, and I loved the story that was run by the Onion television show, where it was like, you don't know how much money the CIA has saved because of Facebook. People will just post all their information. Intelligence gathering. Can you imagine the Nazis and World War II?
Talking about that, saying about if you actually knew, or if someone boiled it down for you and said, there's this page that will take all of your information, where you are, what you do with your friends.
Yeah, and you're going to volunteer. Yeah, you're going to give it all up. I mean, honestly, but the social media project has somewhat backfired on them, and that is it has become more prevalent than mainstream media, and that is television. Look, everyone knows that television is dying because there's so many channels, it is so fragmented, but more importantly than that, it's not fast enough compared to a lot of the interactive things that people want. YouTube is the new television. And it has been for some years now. And because of that, people are pumping out a lot of information, a lot of different places. So, which is why the flat earth concept and really a lot of conspiracy concepts are gaining way more traction, because how are you going to control that if you're the authority? You can't shut it down. The best you can do is kind of steer it in certain directions, maybe hope for the best. They've been avoiding it so far, but even Neil deGrasse Tyson, when he came on Bloomberg Television and CNN just last month, and he goes and he's telling them, and this is the part again that feels kind of like a setup, because I've been in this long enough that I'm kind of becoming jaded. I don't take things at face value anymore. And that is, he goes on national television and he tells the host that if you're going to give ball earthers voice, you should not give equal time to the flat earthers. And I'm thinking, why in the world are you saying this live? Why are you talking about this on television? Because you could just as easily have easily done this behind closed doors with the producers. You don't have to do
this. Great news, the fact that he's even uttering the words.
Exactly, which means it feels like they're running out of gas. Well, I mean, let's face it. Look what's happened in the last 30 days. After NASA received its $20 billion budget for 2016, they come out almost immediately and say that they're shutting down the Orion program, which was one of the cruxes that we use, because the Orion program, again, you can look it up on NASA, their website, Orion Trial by Fire, where they said that they don't know how to figure out the Van Allen radiation problem. And then they come out and say, oh yeah, by the way, we're postponing the program indefinitely. What are you talking about indefinitely? Well, because of a French piece of scientific hardware the French didn't have ready in time, so we're going to miss our window. So we're going to scrub all the launch dates to at least 2018. That was staggeringly amazing. And then the Canadian...
You touched on it, and I want to kind of keep you on track because of a question I was going to ask a bit later.
Go ahead.
And I'll phrase it really directly, because you've brought up the Van Allen problem, but which we'll hopefully cover in this next question. But have we been to the moon?
God, no. No. In fact, I love Flat Earth so much because it answered a question for me that I have been looking for the last 10 years, which was, it's not that we faked the moon stuff. The moon stuff has aged horribly. I mean, it hasn't aged as badly as some of the 60 television shows. Like,
it's not terrible, but it's obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as like Gilligan's Island or Bewitched or stuff like that. So it's some television shows from back then, but it's aged badly. So what I was looking at when I looked at the moon was, okay, it's not that it was faked. Why are you faking it? And it was like, why do it? Why not? Why would you spend that sort of? I mean, you want to do it for American pride and say, "Oh, we planted the flag, rah rah, go USA." Yeah, that's okay, but man, you spent a lot of money for something. The return on investment just wasn't there. Then, when the flat Earth thing came into effect, then it made sense because it took a big piece and it put it in the middle of a lot of other puzzle pieces, which was it turned it from a question into a statement, which was it's not that you wanted to fake the moon program. You had to fake it. If you do not fake the Apollo program, you run the risk of private corporations eventually getting involved, the public getting behind it, and enough enthusiasm getting behind private space programs to where, especially corporations, that you can't stop it. So you have to become the gatekeepers right away. You create the Apollo program, you fake it as long as you can, you make it as boring as you can, and then you shut the whole thing down and keep it under wraps for as long as you can. Because admit it, I mean, all the military subcontractors that are out there that could have pulled this off, McDonnell Douglas, General Dynamics, Boeing, Hughes Aircraft to a lesser degree, all these systems, they would have partnered with some of the bigger corporations, the oil companies, or heck, even now. I mean, Coca-Cola, they'd love to be on the moon. Pepsi, Frito-Lay, are you kidding? Corporate banners would love to be on the moon, and they're not. So you have to fake the moon program. No different than you have to fake the space program to get the picture. You have to fake the moon program to at least get it out of people's heads. And even one of a couple of physicists that were hanging out in Neil deGrasse Tyson's show the other day, a younger girl, she goes, yeah. She goes, that's a thing. And she goes, yeah, that's great. She goes, do it again. She goes, I want to be alive when there's somebody landing on the moon, walking around. She goes, I want that. Let's do it again. Because we're 2 generations out now to where you can talk to somebody that's coming out of college right now, and they're like, I mean, the moon is ancient history by comparison. And the question has to come up, especially with the younger generations, like, why aren't we there right now? And they're saying, well, there's typical. It's like most people don't know, for example, there's supposedly a Chinese space probe that's been there since 2013. That's been kind of driving around, doing stuff. It's like, why aren't you in the Sea of Tranquility taking pictures of the moon buggies and the American flag and accidentally tipping it over and saying, oops, didn't mean to do that? Nobody's doing that. No country. So there's all these space organizations, right? The Indian, the Chinese, the Russian, the Japanese, the European Union. All these people supposedly have space programs, and nobody's even talking about landing somebody on the moon. Why not? It's been we supposedly last left in 1972. It's 43 years. Nobody's doing anything on the moon. Don't give me that crap. They've avoided it so deliberately that only now, again, with the internet and social media, only now are people kind of taking notice and starting to scratch their head, which is why I put the questions out there. People have been giving me, some of the debunkers saying, well, you don't have proof. And I'm going, oh, no. The burden of proof has been on mainstream science now for 500 years. And all the proof that they should have, and by that I mean tens of thousands of pictures of the Earth in full view in sunlight, and thousands of hours of video of the Earth rotating on its axis. Oh God!
Well, you've touched on something that's quite interesting in the respect that we have got photos now, and yes, we'll accept that, or we've got a photo and lots of composites. Yeah. But we knew what Earth was long before we could even fly. We knew exactly what everything was. Yeah, we did. And that was the funny thing about this theory. Now, part of it I do believe was whoever built this place, that was part of the natural process. And that is hide the fence by allowing the globe model to come into being. But there were huge assumptions that were made for an amazing amount of years, for hundreds of years. And that was, you were talking about the Earth as a globe, but you didn't have anywhere near the technology to prove it. All you had was the math. And just again, the first balloons. So if you talk about the globe Earth in the 1500s,
It takes 250 years before you even get balloons that can carry people. It takes all the way until 1900 before your very first planes happen. And then really, and it's not that long ago, all the way up until 1957 before you can send a rocket up high enough to maybe take a picture of the Earth from space. And you would have thought people would have been clamoring for that. And they dragged their feet for years on that one. Because think about this. If you believe the Apollo space program, Apollo 8 went around, supposedly orbited the moon. They didn't land. 9 supposedly didn't. I thank you for the guy that emailed me finally and checked the homework on that. Apollo 9 didn't, but Apollo 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. All those flights supposedly went to the moon and back. Nobody took a picture. The only picture that was taken was the last mission. Apollo 17 on the way back. Oh, yeah, by the way, we better take a shot of the moon. That just screams dragging your feet. And that is, we're going to wait till the last possible minute before we release a picture of Earth. It's like, really, 1969, you're not going to do that? You're not going to take pictures of the Earth constantly? They waited, and then they only took one on top of it. One shot of full-blown, Earth from space in direct sunlight, and then they milked it for 43 years. That is amazing marketing ability there. But again, the internet sunk it in the end because they couldn't hold it forever. But they did. I will give them this. They held on to it for as long as they could, a lot longer than I thought they would be able to pull it off.
I mean, you're saying that obviously the lie surrounding the moon has crumbled. But as the lie for flat Earth slowly starts to crumble away beneath us, one of the things that you postulate in your flat Earth clues is that people will run to the church. And again, back to Jaron, who was on a couple of weeks ago, the way he put it was that the church has got you in the heliocentric model, whether you become an atheist or become a priest. It makes no odds. The church has bought into the heliocentric model, and for that reason, people wouldn't run back. Would you still stand by the sort of good china explanation or the good silverware that they'll pull it out and say we knew all along?
Yeah, I do, and here's why. The church, because people are. I don't want to step on too many toes here, but I'm going to try. So I'll be delicate, and that is, look. 80% of the population of this world follows a religion in some way, shape, or form. And the 5 big ones that are out there, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity, they're big. They're all big. They're all powerful. And there's a lot of loyal people involved. In fact, I don't even know who's the most enthusiastic of any of those groups. Probably the least enthusiastic will probably be Buddhism because they just do their own thing. But here's the problem. The problem is that you're giving them, they've all been looking for the longest time. Everybody's been looking for some sort of magical artifact. They've all been looking for something that they can stick on, put on a pedestal and say, this is proof that religion is real and God is real.
Ark of the Covenant, Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail, Spirit Destiny, the One Ring. That sort of stuff. So I go off on that stuff. But yeah, it's all basically the same thing. If we are created, and again, it's going to be tough to be an atheist if this actually comes to fruition, and I think it's going to fairly soon. Then there's going to be a lot of people that are going to look to the church for help. For 2 reasons. One, they're going to look at science. Unfortunately, science is going to take a huge hit in the stomach. And that is, they're going to say, at the very least, oh, by the way, science was wrong about something kind of small, the shape of the Earth. It's not like they were wrong. It's not like being wrong about this or that. When you're wrong about something about the shape of the Earth, that's gonna tick a lot of people off. And there's going to be, they may not be go on television and say it, but there's going to be a lot of pulpit speeches saying that science was wrong and we knew it the whole time. We always said there was a firmament and this and that. And honestly, even if, I wasn't kidding when I said this, even if you parked a giant alien spaceship next to the edge of the firmament and you had them out there and they had blueprints, they said, we built it, you're still going to have a huge amount of people that aren't going to buy it. They're going to say, you know what? You didn't build crap. God built it. And you're not the highest power, and which is why the big reason why you hide this thing for as long as you can, because you can't be the ultimate authority on this world if you're not the ultimate authority. You can be the strongest government in the world with the strongest military, but if you're inside an enclosed structure, if you're in a built world, people are going to look and say, yeah, you're strong and all that, but who built this place exactly? Because I'm guessing they're stronger than you are. And it gets weird from there. So do I think people will still run to the church? Yeah, I do.
Do you take any of the religious texts as proof of some of the theoretical information out there, like the waters above? Is that
separating the waters below? Yeah, I do. I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I know some people aren't going to want to hear this, but there are a lot of big similarities between Christianity and Judaism and Islam. They share quite a few of the same stories, and people know that. Buddhism, Hinduism, they got their own thing going. But yeah, when it comes to the text, and I'll throw some of it back to because I'm not big on quoting chapter and verse, but I will mention two things. One is Rob Skiba, of course. Real big on chapter and verse, and he went over everything, at least in the King James, with a fine-tooth comb. And he said, yeah, there's some things that talk about, that you could interpret as a sphere, but there's a lot more things that talk about the earth not moving, the earth being fixed, and of course all the stories that. And I only touched on one in the clues, but the story of Joshua, where he asks that the Lord hold the sun in the sky an extra day so he can slay more enemies. Oh, that's tough to do in a solar system. There's a lot of physics you got to mess with. But if it's just an enclosed system, that's just hitting the pause button. That's easy by comparison. Not to mention the Tower of Babel, which doesn't make any sense on a spinning globe that's going through the solar system. But if it's a fixed thing and you're trying to get to the firmament, that tower makes a lot more sense. So
what are your actual religious beliefs? I mean, I asked because in yesterday's Strange World broadcast, you were talking about your survival guide that you did a few years back and said about getting good karma by giving it away for free. I mean, do you believe in God? Do you believe in the devil?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I was raised, there's a couple things. One is I was raised born-again Christian, Vacation Bible School and youth group and Sunday service. And so I did all the fun stuff. But when I got to college, it went off and doing my own thing. I kind of fell away from that. Flat Earth, though, reaffirmed what I always believed, and that is I do believe in what goes around comes around. You reap what you sow, and that karma is very, very real. If people want to call it a different name, that's one thing. But I will not, and that's why I made a clue on it. I will not do anything malicious to anyone ever again. Not while I'm on this world. Because I do, because if we are created and this place was created, then you are accountable. Now, I'm not saying that you're constantly being, got a camera on you 24/7, but are you going to take that chance? The joke I made, and some people think I was being glib about it, which was, the Santa Claus argument. And that is, and everyone knows about the naughty and nice list, but how many people actually pay attention to it? Well, you do if you actually see Santa Claus sitting in your living room. Then you really start thinking about, it's like, you're really going to start doing naughty stuff, or you're going to finally come around and do what you're supposed to be doing, and that is be nice to people.
Are you suggesting that Santa Claus is allegory for the devil?
Well, the acronym fits, and that is, Santa is an acronym for Satan. That's a tough one. I don't know. I haven't really given it much thought. Thanks for that one.
Well, I just slipped it in like it was your idea.
No. Although the Santa argument is interesting. That's for sure. He looks kind of looks like the personification of God, but he wears red. And again, his name is an anagram for somebody else that's completely different. So
I think I'll change the subject.
That's all right.
One of the other things you mentioned in your clues was 1984, and this was a question that I phoned my father about and sort of talked about it a little bit with him, and it turned into an hour-long conversation about this one question. And it was a loose question, like most of them that I just sort of slapped down. And it's even really leading, but I'll ask it just as it's written, which was that, like I say, you mentioned 1984. Are there any flat Earth clues in 1984?
No. I only mentioned it because 1984. What a weird book and even a stranger movie. It just seems to, every year, it seems to get more and more relevant. And we've been saying this now for decades, but it just seems to be getting more and more relevant to where even changing history, changing, having the news media, the fact that the news media is completely scripted, even at the local levels, and that, we're the old line from the Matrix is, we're not here because we're free. We're here because we're not free. That whole thing. So I don't think there's any flat Earth references necessarily, but relevance to our current civilization. Oh yeah. Yeah. You want to watch it?
I thought you'd go straight to it. There's a bit where he's in the interrogation room and the interrogator is basically explaining that the stars could be close or could be far away. They can
I didn't know. Nobody told me that one. That's great. That's excellent. I hadn't heard that. I get new movie references. Again, I've been quick to say that the internet hive mind misses nothing. Like the Sword in the Stone, that Disney movie from 1963. Somebody mentioned that to me, that there was a scene in there where they actually pulled out a flat Earth map, and that he was talking to the kid about how the Earth is going to be discovered to be round, like the wizard was telling him what's going to happen in the future. And I included that in the Strange World. Which I have to re-upload after the show is over, unfortunately, because the copyright, I didn't get struck or anything. But the copyright. DC. Oh no, it wasn't that. It was they finally took it down.
Oh, did they actually take it down?
Yeah, they did, because I put in a Twilight Zone, 3 minutes of a Twilight Zone episode where they were talking about mob mentality and how people lash out at other people, and it does not take much for us, because I do think we're.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mark. There's another word for that, which is gaslighting, which is what they're essentially doing.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I've heard several people have mentioned gaslighting to me recently, but yeah, where the mob mentality, it doesn't take much, and I think that is one of the big flaws of our civilization, and that is, if we have a common goal, I think we can do amazing things, but if we don't, all that energy and passion and enthusiasm, we have a real tendency to turn against each other, which is sad.
I mean, I'm kind of ticking off the flat Earth clues here, but one of the things that has come under a little bit of, well, someone just disagreed. I might as well just mention him by name. So Matt Powerland fundamentally disagreed with your principle when it came to discussing flat Earth, which is the first rule of Flat Club: don't talk about Flat Club. Yeah. Would you still say that is the best rule of thumb in general terms?
I've seen, because you've got to know the movie reference first, and that is the 1999 movie. 1990, by the way, the greatest year in movies. Anyone have any doubt? Look up the films that came out in 1999. But Fight Club with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton, where the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club, but it's just something you say. So you're not supposed to talk about Fight Club with everybody. You're supposed to discern who exactly you think is up for it. You can't just go into any room and say, hey, let me tell you about this Fight Club I'm involved with on Thursday nights. You go in and you see who might be a good candidate to be in Fight Club. So when it comes to the Flat Earth thing, I've gotten too many emails from people that go to their family dinner table, especially over the holidays. I mean, my God, where they'll sit at Thanksgiving and they'll say, oh yeah, by the way, I'm into Flat Earth now. And it's like, are you kidding? You would have been better off to say that you've changed your religion, you've changed your sexuality, and you're going to start taking, skin pigmentation and change your ethnic.
Be a recovering alcoholic transsexual, but
exactly.
Flat Earther. No
exactly.
way.
Yeah, I'm now going to be a gay Buddhist heroin addict. You might as well say something like that, because, and I'm not picking on Buddhism, but I'm just saying the big change, because people will look at you like you got a bug on your face. You can't. I know people are excited about that. I mean, but the one of the drawbacks of Flat Earth is, once you get through the process, the 5 stages of acceptance, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Once you get through those, you forget how much time it took you to get to Flat Earth. And so when you want to bring it to somebody, it's like, I'm excited. I got through Flat Earth in 2 weeks. I think I can convince you in an hour. You are kidding yourself. You couldn't be convinced.
I was really naive, because I pretty much got it as soon as.
All right. Well, all right. You're one of the rare people.
I'm an exception. I know that now. But at the time, I was really naive. I thought everyone will get this straight away, just like I have. Yeah. And boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Most people, it takes them a while. And that's because people are excited once they become Flat Earthers. They're excited and they want to tell people about it. And that's why I do the Fight Club thing. It's like, look, you've got to remember how long it took you. And then at the very least, maybe you can cut that time in half if you think you can tell them very well. But unless you can explain it really, really well, You're better off just showing people some videos and putting
Or
them.
you did have three very good solutions. I mean, the first one, I mean, if you want to, they're yours, so I won't take the words out of your mouth, but the first was you're being hidden. I mean, do you want to explain exactly what you mean by, you said it right at the end of the clues to sort of get people's interest and tackle it without using the words flat Earth. But when you say you are being hidden, how is that relevant to somebody bringing up flat Earth to somebody else who isn't a flat earther?
The you're being hidden thing is really more of money's being hidden, you're being hidden, the God is being hidden. Those are the three big ones, but. Yeah, there's different because yes, that's one of the first things I tell people. I say, look, bring up flat Earth without using the term flat Earth, and I'll call Alex Jones' show out now because I know that their producers wanted to do a show on flat Earth, but the point was they couldn't figure out how to do a show without mentioning the words flat Earth. That was their problem, and because once they were worried about if their audience figured it out, would they turn off? Would they just lose droves of people? And that's the same with anybody's show that is nervous about doing it. They all say the same thing, and that is, we don't know how to bring up flat Earth. We're nervous about bringing it up because, there's a whole bunch of people that are in it. There's a whole bunch of people that aren't in it. Are we willing to swap those people? And but you're being hidden. First off, instead of flat Earth, which is why I deliberately used enclosedworld.com. I could have used flatearth.com or a variation of it. I chose Enclosed World or Enclosed Earth or Enclosed System or Truman Show, anything along those lines. I love Truman Show as a reference. It's become a cliche now in the flat Earth world, but it's so true. It's so unbelievably true. And that is, what's the difference between the Truman Show and where we are now? It's just bigger. That's all it is. The premise still applies. That, and there's probably not really many actors in our version because you don't need them. Well, that's why I was really excited when I made that clue because I realized as you were scaling it up, it was like, holy smokes, you don't even need the actors once you get to a certain size. And 2 generations later, if there were any actors, you just pull them all out and that's it, or let them die natural causes. And that would be it.
And for us, 10 generations later, here we are on a globe spinning at 1,000 miles an hour.
Exactly, and nobody questions it. No different than, which is why I used, and I don't want to forget the being hidden part, but why I used the movie, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, because that was done without any special effects whatsoever, and that was, we believe what we are told as kids. So if you take kids out into a wildlife preserve and you build a fake town from the 1800s and tell them, oh yeah, by the way, you live in the 1800s, why wouldn't they believe it? Why they're going to believe exactly what you tell them. No, they actually live 100 years later in the future, but they don't know that. So what's the difference between what we know, that again, why this trick is so good? Because people don't like to be fooled. People don't like to be, they like street magic, but they want to know, they don't like to be fooled by it if they can help it. And I try to tell them, I was going, look, don't be so hard on yourself. You were fooled the day you were born. You and your parents were fooled, and they were fooled generations before you. You didn't have a chance. Your parents told you lived in a globe. What did you think you were going to do? You were going to believe that. Anyway, sorry. Get back to the hidden things. So you were being hidden. That was a direct reference to the GPS system, which was trying to get people to say, look, if you're flying in the southern hemisphere over water below anywhere below the equator, your plane's not being tracked, and that's a big deal. Especially for Americans, because we're arrogant and we have a huge sense of self-importance. We don't like to think that we're being lost in any way, shape, or form. Money is being hidden, and that is the corporations. The corporations in the Antarctica that aren't allowed to go there. Why isn't anyone allowed to make money down in Antarctica? And then, of course, God being hidden. That's the big one that I tried to get towards the people in the church, and that is, everybody in the church wants to know there's proof of God. What if there was proof of God, proof of intelligent design? If the government found it, would it be any different than all the other secrets they've been hiding for years and years? Like an Indiana Jones movie, if they found proof of God, would they tell you? They probably would think about it for a few minutes, but that's all they would think about it and say, yeah, we're not showing them proof of God, because that changes the power structure and it takes a long time to recoup from that. They're just not going to do it. They're going to hold on to it, and they've been holding on to it for 60 years. And they're going to hold on to the bitter end until they can flip it on you, until they can use it to their advantage, which is why I'm still doing research every day trying to figure out what's next.
And maybe got one question, or maybe a little quick fire round. Now,
Sure.
as I don't know, you're probably the most vocal of any flat earthers, and as a result of that, I was a little bit overwhelmed with the reaction I got on just a little advert I put out for this show, and people had a lot of questions.
Sure.
And frankly, I was a little bit ticked off that they were all they were all personal questions about you. Not that I'm not interested in you personally, but we're not on a date. So it's entirely up to you. I've either got one sort of final question, or if you want to, the trolly, shilly questions that have been posed if you want them, I'll ask them, because apparently this is what people want to know.
All right. You throw them at me. I've got to throw them at me. We got.
You sure?
Couldn't hurt at this point.
Fair enough. Okay, well, I'll rattle them off. There's not very many. So
Sure.
First and foremost, Mr. Sargent, what is your current job?
Nothing. I am currently looking. I moved up to Seattle in 5 months ago from Boulder, Colorado, where I was working for the last 20 years. And the flat earth thing, I really wanted to get into it. I think it's something that's going to be something major. And so I am up north of Seattle right now, living with family. And I am undecided whether or not, it really depends on if something takes off or not. And I'll be perfectly blunt here. This thing got enough speed quickly enough that there were television people that were fishing around on this. And the stuff that they were talking about seemed to be pretty involved. And I was like going, okay, what do I want to do here? Because if I go back into get back into the tech thing, how long, that's Murphy's Law. If I get back to the tech thing and all of a sudden I get a call, look, I'm not going to turn down. If a TV thing happens and anyone out there wants to criticize me for that, don't be hypocritical, because anybody in the flat earth will do the same thing. And there's other people.
Leads me on nicely to the next question, which is,
Sure.
Pretty sure I know the answer to this. Are you being paid for interviews?
No, God, no. As a matter of fact, I'll even take that one step further, and that is, I have not even solicited a single, including this one. I have not solicited a single interview. Everybody has contacted me.
I emailed you.
Yeah. Everybody has contacted me, including the repeat interviews. I'm not in close touch with anybody, and that includes Ground Zero and Coast to Coast, and everybody else in between, and the people that are, even the people that kind of been circling around, like the John B. Wells thing that we're waiting to happen, the Art Bell thing that never happened. The other shows were just, but no, I have not been paid a dime for the interviews. Why would I? You don't generally pay people for interviews unless you get to a certain level, and that's usually mainstream. The conspiracy world.
I know it's fast. This is pretty much the same question, but rephrased slightly. So, have you profited from flat Earth?
No, and I did that deliberately. There are certain things that I did that I wanted to. I wanted to make myself as transparent as possible. So I put out my full name. My channel is called Mark K. Sargent. K stands for Kendall. My backstory is all there. Grew up near Seattle, moved out to Boulder, Colorado. Everything is real. You can all look it up. All the games I worked on, all the stuff. And yes, I did play games professionally. And I didn't monetize my YouTube channel. I'm not selling a coffee mug or a t-shirt. If you guys think I'm making money anywhere, you show me where. You show me a single donation link. You show me a single anything. And that's done for credibility more than anything else. I do not want to be accused of being a sellout. That being said, if a television thing came to me and says, we want to do a reality show on Flat Earth, oh, you bet I'm doing it. Don't think.
I don't blame you. I would monetize my videos if there was any point. But
well, the monetizing the videos, I just don't like the commercials. So yeah, you'll see some ads on some of the stuff I do, but that's mostly because if I use a piece of music that's already been monetized, it will come through automatically. But the Flat Earth clues don't have a single one on them. And I did that.
As a viewer, it's annoying when you've got to wait 20 seconds to skip the ad, which you inevitably do. And,
exactly.
Not monetizing it just makes your videos more enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. And for those conspiracy people out there, I can't hypnotize you if I keep being interrupted with commercials. So.
Next, there's only a couple more questions from the viewers, which is genuinely where these have come from. So how much time in a day would you say you spend on Flat Earth?
Really varies. I'd say a minimum of 4 hours, maybe 5. But if I'm doing like a special project, like a music slideshow, like today, I'll be spending quite a bit because I did an interview for this one. I've got to upload Strange World from last night, and so most of it's just technical crap. Plus, I got to look at the dailies. So I literally go in and I say flat Earth, set the filter to today, see what's new. And now, because of all the news stuff that's happening, I have to go into a couple search engines and type in flat Earth and see what's going on in there. So yeah, minimum 4 hours, maximum 8 on a bad day. We'll see.
And of all of them, there was literally one flat Earth question, which I thought was good and reasonably well phrased. But I'll ask it you, and I pretty much know what the answer is already. But can you address the curve that we still see after lens correction at 30 miles up?
Show me where that is. Okay, I'll address it with this, because Jonathan, my old co-host from Strange World, actually came up with a better thing, and that was, he said that he was looking at some 3D modeling, and some people have already done this, and you take a sphere and you take a fake camera on 3D model. You have to go up very, very high to see any curvature at all, a lot further than 30 miles. And people say, well, doesn't that disprove the flat Earth? I'm going, no. What that does is it shows the weather balloons that actually have no curvature at all. But at the very least, when you compare it to the NASA stuff, why does the NASA stuff, even at lower, medium altitudes, have this severe curvature, including the ISS time-lapse footage? That curvature is ridiculous for the altitude they say it's at.
That concludes our viewer question section. I've got one final question, and it's about a particular person who I know you know a little bit about, but I've been looking into recently and finding to be quite a fascinating character. And I know you're a card-carrying member of the Flat Earth Society. That's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll show it to you right here. Yep, there it is. Flat Earth Society. That's the original Flat Earth Society where Thomas Dolby is a member.
Well, that was who I was going to ask you about.
Thomas Dolby?
Yeah.
Seriously, that's who you're going to ask about?
He's a card-carrying member like yourself of the Flat Earth Society, and he's there dancing around, singing about science with Buzz Aldrin. Oh,
yeah, I remember that. He doesn't know, but I don't know if Thomas Dolby is actually a true believer, because this society, even though I'm a card-carrying member, number 539, I condemned them early on, I think in the very first introduction, because again, I've never seen a place where you have dedicated trolls that come in year after year and just chase people away like bad bouncers at a club. I've just never seen anything like that. And so that's what
I mean, you said in the clues, or one of the interviews was, you phrased it, there's nothing to see here. But what would they actually say?
Literally, that's it. Nothing to see here. The Flat Earth Society isn't serious. You don't have to join. You don't have to be a member. You might as well not even show up. It's like they're talking you out of going into the club. And these guys should have been shut down years ago. And they have thousands of posts. That's their job. That's all they do. And there's like two main guys. And that's all they do day in. It's like, anyone that posts any interest in the Flat Earth Society at all, they just shoo them away. And I was really amazed that as this thing, as Flat Earth blew up in 2015, that the Flat Earth Society didn't approach me formally and or approach anybody on a regular basis and say, hey, why aren't they absolutely jumping on board with this thing?
That's a good point. I'd never thought about it. You just, because they're controlled opposition, you just accept that and you don't think about it. But yeah, that's really suspicious. Why aren't they battering down?
Why aren't they just running with this thing? I mean, the amount of increase in attention to this topic, you would have think that this is the second coming for them. And they don't even, they say, oh, this video is good, but that's it. They just don't get involved, and I'm just amazed. I'm just really, really amazed. Well, and then Eric, not to give him too much credit, but he was disgusted with him enough that he ended up founding his own Flat Earth Research Society, just to get away from him. And now I never go to their forums. I never do anything. I'm just surprised that they never emailed anybody after that. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a crazy situation. Was there anything that you wanted to tell any viewers about, things that you've got up and coming, interviews and so forth?
I'm trying to get a tank. I've got a bunch of interviews coming up, but nothing. I'm trying to get. I did an interview recently with Fade to Black, and he's one of the backup co-hosts for Coast to Coast, and I got to get that one up really soon. Trying to get a tank commander. We're trying to, because he's fairly high up there, in rank, and that might be a little tough to do to get him to actually come on air. But that's the United States military, United States Army.
Oh, cool! More proofs on Strange World.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get next. I'm still looking for Air Force, still looking for ex-NASA, and still looking for an astrophysicist to come out and put their neck on the line. The closest I got was a German guy, but he wouldn't do it. He'd only do it anonymously. And it's like, what's the point? Are you kidding? I have my full name and everything. You won't come out there and put your neck on the line. And most of it's because they're worried. They don't want, just in case something goes wrong. Now, they're 99% sure that they can handle it. But if something goes wrong, do you really want your name attached? I mean, that's a lot of education that's on the line there. So we'll see.
But presumably you don't want your family ridiculed as well. And
yeah, exactly. So we'll see. Until then, I'm just going to keep doing my stuff. Keep doing Patricia's show. Keep doing Strange World. Keep doing the videos as much as I can on YouTube. I'm going to do a new series eventually, which is going to be more of a boiled down how you approach friends and family with the flat Earth. I'm going to try to make some talking points that are so easy to understand that at the very least they won't just be met with hostility. That'd be nice. That and still trying
just in case there's any British press, we live with optimism in this household. Can you give out maybe some contact details and then I'll wrap it up if that's good with you?
Oh yeah, sure. Contact details. The website is enclosedworld.com. My direct email address is msargent, that's MSARGENT 23 at comcast.net. Yes, I still have one of those. At least I don't have my old AOL address anymore. My phone number, 303-494-6631. It will probably go to voicemail because that phone just never stops ringing. And if you want, if you're ever in doubt, just Google Flat Earth Clues. You will find it. There's a lot of people mirroring them because I don't monetize them. So people, if you want to monetize the Flat Earth Clues, there's been some people that have had a lot of hits off them. Hey, go for it. I don't care. It's great. And just keep making Flat Earth stuff. Keep it positive. And I love the people that do Flat Earth music. Anyone that sends me a Flat Earth song, I will see if I can turn it into something. Superb.
Mark Sargent, you have been an absolutely superb guest. Thank you ever so much for being on Flat Earth UK Live.
Thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
I'm glad to have you here. To all of you who have been in the comments, I've been vaguely keeping an eye on what you've been saying, along with Tim Osman, who's been commenting away nicely. Thank you very much to all of the people who tuned in to Flat Earth UK Live. I've been Nathan Oakley. I will see you all in the next video.